Hello, humans. Master Dinner Flights here, bringing you the low quality content you deserve. And today, we are going to be going over Lunalights, as it was the ultimate vote between the poll. I'm going to do three of those for which is Agents, Constellars, and of course, Lunalight. I just wanted to see which one was in the most dire need, and it turns out it was this one. But that being said, I wanted to really think about this one for a bit, and I think what... So, let me get to the point. Right, when I started looking at this deck, I also wanted to look online to see what other people were up to, and it made me realize something. Most of the deck list you could find were basically adding in engines that other decks were already doing, as in people were playing the Fiendsmith cards in here, people were playing Forest cards, people were playing all these cards that it's in every deck, and I noticed two things with that. For one, this deck did not use those engines any more or less proficient than any other deck. So in reality, Lunalights didn't get better off of these engines. Well, at the same time, if you were wanting to run those engines, there wasn't much of a point in putting them in Lunalight. And then two, there's a certain amount of self-awareness we need to have when talking about rogue decks. And that is, if you are choosing to play rogue decks, it is because you are wanting to play a deck that is going against the conventions of typical gameplay. So when you put in engines that you can find in every other deck that don't even benefit the deck you're putting them in, while also adding several $100s to the price tag of said rogue deck, it feels like there's a certain loss of self-awareness that you are playing a rogue deck. That you are playing a deck that's not designed to be a part of the meta, but designed to be a countermeasure or counterproductive force to it. So it feels like all these modern engines in Lunalight were much more a superficial obligation than they were anything else. And I wanted to stray away from that because, one, if these weren't actually benefiting the deck in any meaningful way, the only thing you're actually doing with these engines is drastically increasing the financial cost of playing a deck that isn't the best deck you could be playing, which is pointless. So I'm not going to insult your intelligence in that way, and I'm going to say, hey, this is a rogue deck. It will have these weaknesses, but in exchange, it is something designed to go against how the game is currently being played. And as you can see from my hand, I really went all out once respecting this. And that is, I fully and absolutely committed to the idea that this deck is just Infurrity. In every way, shape, or form, this deck is Infurrity. It ignores its original mechanic to spam rank 4s and negates. It's always going to try to build a board. And when it goes second, it's going to try to always throw as many Xyzs as possible until one sticks. Like, that is the purpose of this deck. And rather than try to make it something else, like, what? Put a bunch of hand traps in here just so it could make boards that are not impressive to keep up. Like, the point is, like, if you were to try to make it in a manner that respects the meta, you will have an objectively worse deck in every way. So there's no point in doing it. You are better off accepting this deck's identity and playing into it than you are trying to shove in 12 hand traps for this deck to be too inconsistent to use, or to put in a bunch of modern engines that don't improve this deck's playability, but drastically increase the price. So it's like, you need to know what you're getting into. But what I wanted to do first is show off a test hand, so you can get an idea of where my thoughts are with this deck, and I can kind of show off what I was interested in doing. So we are going to start off with a very weird one. Empowerment. We are going to discard one card, which we will discard the Kaleidochick, and we can just summon an empowered warrior from our deck. and we will go for Dragonox. Now, these cards are kind of cool, but what's really interesting are the pendulum effects. Because in this combo, you do have the ability to recycle pendulums. So the pendulum effects can actually be made to matter. In this one, just ending the battle phase can be really handy sometimes. So we will go ahead and we will normal summon Dark Worm, and that will allow us to get Gate 0. So we'll go ahead and do this. Scale these both up. We will then... we'll activate Tenki first, and we'll get another Kaleido Chick. Actually, instead of Kaleido Chick... No, we'll go for Kaleido Chick. We will go ahead and link these two off. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. We will link these two off into Beyond the Pendulum. And of course, that allows us to get, yet another Pendulum monster. And in this case, we can just go for another Tiger. So we'll pay 1,200. And then we will Pendulum summon everything except the Tiger. And we're going to save our normal summon for later. Next, we will go ahead and link these two off into Exceed the Pendulum. And we will go ahead and recycle back that Dark Worm to our hand. And then we are going to go ahead and dump a Martin. And as you can see, we got a lot of Lunalight stuff. And this is also something I wanted to mention with this deck is what I wanted to do is maximize the number of really, really broken extra deck enablers. Because these cards at their core, their best purpose is to bait interactions. Like, your opponent's going to hand trap you. If you have enough extra deck monsters that kind of defeat the idea of hand trapping your opponent, eventually, like, your opponent can't have enough hand traps. Without having so many, it's questionable that they themselves get to play. So that's basically the idea of why these cards are even in this deck. Next, we are going to overlay these two into Force Tricks so we can get into another broken extra deck monster. Or let me rephrase that. Any Link Vrains type of effect you see in Link monsters are inherently broken. Extra deck monsters that resource the main deck are kind of antithetical to what it means to be an extra deck. So we will go into Wise Tricks, and that will allow us to summon another bird from deck. Be Raider's Wing. Then we'll go ahead and use Tiger for once. This will be our first time using Tiger, and then we can go ahead and dump Martin. Then we'll overlay these two into another Force Tricks, detach the Raider's Wing, and we will go ahead and get Singulanius, summon it, and we also can go ahead and set Soul Shade Force. Next, we will detach from this to special summon the Raider's Wing, and then in addition, we can go ahead and turn these two into Rusty Bardiche, which we will go ahead and dump a Boots to set a Shade Brigandine, and we will banish the Boots to grab a Fog Blade. Now, I will tell you right now, I do not believe this deck is 100% optimized, but the main thing I'm trying to do is to demonstrate what my thoughts are with this deck. And I think this is a good way to go about it. Just show all the most ridiculous steps possible to get there. Because, like I said, the best way to play this deck is to actually respect its identity. Because to try to make it a different identity, to try to pretend like this deck can be mid-range, to try to pretend like it benefits off of newer engines, is kind of pointless. Like, there's a genuine... Like I said, there needs to be an amount of self-awareness that this isn't every other deck in the room. So don't play it as such. Next, we can go ahead and bounce this to summon Zephyros. Take 400. And we can go ahead and go into this. We will go into Nightmare. Next, we will activate Tiger, and we will go ahead and summon Chick again. And then we can start dumping the remaining names. I usually like Emerald Bird, and sometimes White Rabbit. White Rabbit's really good against anything trying to set nonsense. And it's really good for follow-up against trap decks, because when you dump it to the graveyard, you like guarantee you're going to have a way to interact with spells and traps on the following turn. Next, let's see here. We're going to go ahead and activate the Shade Brigandine already, and that will allow us to go into Redoer. We're going to go ahead and bounce with Martin, and then we will go into Rafflesia here, and then we'll Tiger for the last time to go ahead and summon the final chick to dump the final name. Let's see here. Yeah. Actually, before that, let's see here. Because my board's legitimately too full. So before we do this, we'll say this Tiger hasn't been used yet. We will go ahead and activate Soul Shade Force, and we will summon Infurrity. And when we do, we're actually going to slurp this one up. And then when we do this, we can summon that, and we're going to turn these two into SP. So at our end board is going to have Infurrity, Redoer that can spin, 2 Book of Moons on some monster, and the Omni Negate, and Rafflesia, which of course my targets are actually, unironically, Gravedigger's Trap Hole and Treacherous. And this might sound a bit extra, but the reason I wanted to do that is originally I was playing Tolmaeus, Nova, and Infurrity to be an early XC that can catch like Nibiru's and hand traps. The problem with that was 3 extra deck slots, and this deck could benefit off a 20-card extra deck. So I had to consolidate it somehow, and Rafflesia was like the only option. So if I'm going to commit, I need to commit fully again, like I said. So we got these two. So we got up to 2 pops or a Grave Negate. We got a spin. If we want to use Treacherous, we got to use it before we spin with Redoer. We got double Book of Moon, we have an Omni Negate, and we have a Banish. Which one of the cool things about SP is if you want to keep your Cyber Dragon guaranteed alive till next turn, you can banish it, and then when it comes back, you can slurp something up, have its negate, and pick apart at the opponent's board. And then we have Fogblade if all that fails, which might not sound too impressive, but when you consider the fact that all your interactions are made up of monsters on board, a Dark Ruler can do a lot. So having anything that can interact when that Dark Ruler hits, it might not sound like a lot, but because your opponent can't kill you, as long as you just interact with the thing that's going to truly take away everything from you, you're gonna be fine. Not only will you be fine, but like this is going to reborn the Rusty. So when you go up into a follow-up into a Dark XE, you're going to get a pop, and the Dark XE you're probably going to go into is its own standalone OTK. So it's like, it's fine. So this is a pretty solid end board, all things considered. Now that we got that done, let's get into the deck list because that was pretty long-winded. Now, as you can see from this monstrosity, when I said I was pretty much building Infurrity, I meant it. Now, do I think this is the absolute most optimal Lunalight deck you could ever play? The answer is no. But why am I showing you this list regardless? Because of the fact that, like I said when showing off this deck, it really matters that you respect that this deck can't be mid-range. This deck can't be like every other deck in the room, because the truth is, I'm very much of this opinion when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! That when you try to change the playstyle of a deck to accommodate for the current meta, you actually end up with a deck worse than if you were to just play that deck while not respecting how the meta needs to be played. You will end up with something worse. When you try to make a mid-range deck out of a combo deck, it will always be worse than if you just had that as a combo deck. If you try to make a stun deck out of an aggressive control deck, it will always be worse than like that aggressive control deck. Like, that's the point I'm trying to make, is when you try to make it a deck that tries to accommodate for the game, that goes against its intended playstyle, you defeat the point of the deck. So it's an actual conflict with how you should be both playing the deck and how you want to be playing in this meta. If you're going to play an Infurrity pseudo FTK combo deck, play it as such, because it will be more proficient at that. So, now that we got this, you can kind of get a better idea of why I'm building the deck like this. And we're going to start off with 2 Tiger. The very cool thing is, as long as you open Tiger Chick, you technically open 2 Tiger Chick. Because of the fact that Exceed the Pendulum is legal, as long as you see Tiger and Chick, you can get to both Tigers, and that's what's really impressive, because what you do is eventually, while you have 1 dump and 1 summon with Tiger, you can get to the point where you can dump a Tiger, revive it with Tiger, and then when you go into Beyond and Exceed, you can go ahead and grab that Tiger, basically from the deck. Now, this doesn't create a new level 4. As a matter of fact, it eats up one of those slots. The thing is, when you put it in scale, it does give you an extra level 4. But the more important thing is when you pop a Tiger, then it makes up for that extra level 4. And when you pop Tiger, you don't truly lose out on Tiger being a part of your game. You only destroyed one of them. So, like, there's definitely a benefit from having both Tigers, even if you have to get to 1 manually. So, that's pretty cool. Then we got 3 Kaleido Chick. Very cool. Something I really am thinking about doing is adding IP in here. Because if you go into IP, and then tag into SP, and then banish a Chick out of Graveyard with it, you can actually use that as a way to shut off anything your opponent could do in the battle phase, which can include Evenly Matched or that entire dumb Dragon OTK deck. So there's actually some really cool tricks you can do with SP and Kaleido Chick. So I definitely think like IP should really find its way to being a part of this deck, but only if you want to commit to SP. Which, by the way, if you actually take a look at everything in here, the only expensive card in this entire deck list is this one. And that is only one of them. That's also something, when I said you should kind of have a certain amount of self-awareness when making this deck, if you are playing rogue decks, it's probably because you either can't or don't want to commit the money and time into playing this game at such an extremely ridiculous level. And that's admirable, because holy shit, you should never give Konami any of your money if they have such a direct disrespect to your time and money to make a meta as bad as the one we're in. I'm gonna be totally honest. Like, if you play rogue decks, it's probably because you don't have the time and or money, or don't want to spend the time and or money in a game where its creators actively disrespect its community in such a way. That being said, that's why I wanted to keep the price tag of this deck fairly logical, which is why this is like the only expensive card in here. I'm not even sure if it's still expensive. I haven't been playing too much as of late. So the rest of the Lunalights, outside of Martin, these two at their core are extra. Like, you really don't need to play these cards. Emerald Bird is like, it only comes up if you directly send it to grave with like a Greffer and whatnot. Otherwise, it just doesn't matter. It's just another name, which can be neat, but not important. White Rabbit is like a little better because it actually does something, unlike Emerald Bird, where it's just a weird way to trade a 4 for a 4. This one actually has an effect that your deck wouldn't have otherwise, which is to bounce a bunch of back row, and is a good follow-up normal summon. But outside of that, it's like, it's not absolutely necessary in any way. So you could really cut this engine down to 7 cards and really call it Infurrity. Or, as I like to call this deck, Infurrity, because it really is just that deck. Everything that Infurrity was, this deck is, in so many ways. Then for the Dark Bird, Zephyros, Singing, Strangle, and Raider's Wing. Now, the reason I commit to the Raid Raptor stuff is because if you truly do not get a Tiger Chick combo, which happens on more than one occasion, playing the Raid Raptors means the only thing that you really need to do to have a functional end board is put 3 level 4s on board. And if you can do that, it actually doesn't matter that you didn't get to Tiger Chick, because you will be able to do enough serviceable stuff to have an okay inboard, which is honestly pretty crucial, because like even you could put all the consistency boosters in the world and sometimes this just doesn't happen. So that's something to keep in mind. Next we got the pendulums. We got Dark Worm, Gate Zero, and then one of each Empowered Warrior. I have both because one is a low scale, which is important, and the other one has a better pendulum effect if you're able to get it to scale. But that's about it. The only reason these cards are in there is they make it much easier to access beyond the pendulum, and both of these engines are a way to generate level 4s, and they're a way to do that by having a discard outlet, which is also very important. So these cards are pretty strong. As a matter of fact, I actually did not expect to like this engine as much as I do, considering the fact that this engine is almost 10 years old. It feels surprisingly effective, which is, I don't know, I might try this in other things. This is kind of impressive. Then we got Dark Grepher. It's just a name, a level 4 name. That's all it really has going for it. Then Silent Boots. This is like probably the most Garnet of Garnets, because even you can eat Raider's Wing is also a Phantom Knight card. So the only time you really use this is if you're in a combo where you want to get Fog Blade with Rusty. That's about it. That's mainly the single sole purpose, which is questionable at best. But like I said, I don't think this is the end-all be-all deck list, but I do think it's a deck list that you should really look at to consider the possibility that you shouldn't make your deck list nearly $1,000 to not be any better than this. I guess that's the way I made this deck. Then we got 3 Perfume, 3 Goods, 3 Tinky, 2 Empowerment, 2 Dragon Ravine, 1 Terraforming, 1 Foolish, and then the rank up spell. I, for the longest time, was playing Norito and Infinity because I really like the idea of having Tolmaeus Nova Infinity. Like I said, it was so good at catching Nibiru's and whatnot. The problem is, there's just like, your extra deck doesn't really have much of any room, and you really, really need that to have, like, you really are making Tolmaeus Nova Infinity under, there's just so many reasons why I wanted that, but it just took up too much extra deck space, and I was having complete fundamental breakdowns of the deck list just because, like, 3 slots were just taken up for 1 interaction. So that had to change. Then we got Shade Brigandine. I honestly would like 3 in here, and you could definitely find room if you wanted to. They have 1 Fog Blade, Serenade Dance, and then 1 of each Trap Ball for Rafflesia. And that's going to be it from the deck list, except, oh, the extra deck. Beyond the Pendulum, Exceed the Pendulum. I already demonstrated the purpose of these cards. Then we got Wise Tricks, Rusty Bardiche. These are like the extra deck cards that really enable you to keep going, and they're perfect cards that say, I'm going to bait this interaction from you. Like, you want to have your opponent spend as many hand chests as possible before you get to a combo that truly matters. So that's what these cards are really good for, all of them, honestly. And then we got SP and Firewall. Because Apollosa is banned, I always want to try to find a way to end on SP and Firewall, because Firewall will be a bounce while pointing to SP, and then SP will be a banish, and you'll banish the Firewall. And when the Firewall comes back, it'll try to point to SP, and when it does, it gains its bounce back because it left the field. So it's much like a wind-up in that way. It feels like a classic wind-up rabbit, except this wind-up rabbit both bounces and banishes in the process of that, so that's funny. Then we got 2 Force Tricks for the combo, same with Infinity. Redoer, Evil Storm Nightmare, very powerful card. Raider's Knight and Arc Rebellion. I have OTK'd 8,000 attack over game over a Chaos Max with this card before. This card is unbelievable. Like, this is honestly the entire original Lunalight playstyle is worse than this one extra deck monster that takes up 2 slots, and because Raider's Knight into Arc Rebellion achieves everything that the entire Lunalight fusion strategy does alone, which is honestly just breathtaking in the dumbest way possible. Then we got Rafflesia. That's basically my substitute. If I want to have a way to stop Nibiru before like actually playing, I would do this one instead, because Tomias Nova Infinity just takes up too many slots. The real reason I'm so hesitant, one of the best aspects of Tomias was it attached all of its materials to do that. This one doesn't detach any. So it's very tricky. It feels like you can use this so much less than Tomias, but again, like I said, this extra deck is crazy tight. And then we got Tiger King. This extra deck doesn't have enough going second options, which is also why Rafflesia is so good with Treacherous, because that's a going second interaction. But outside of that, like, you definitely need enough names to be enough go second cards to do it. And this can also substitute for some forms of starters. Like if you need a Tiger but can get to 2 Beast Warriors, which is a thing with Foolish Goods, this can help substitute that. That's going to be it from the deck list. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you enjoyed my breakdown of this deck in a way that feels a little different from my normal deck profile. I really wanted to show off the idea of how you should be approaching this deck, and maybe even how you should approach rogue decks in general. I think it's a lost art. It's so easy to just put the newest engine in an old deck, but they don't... like I said, it feels like after a certain point, there's a loss of self-awareness, where the entire point of doing that is to try to see if it can benefit the deck you're trying to play, but if it doesn't, it's just nothing more than an obligation. And no, that's a waste of time. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you all for watching, and remember, Master Nerflex will take your soul. I said I said